Right. Just want to do a quick sound check online. Can you guys hear me?
You're muted still.
Am I still muted?
I could hear you.
Yeah, good.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute's Lunch and Learn lecture series. This fall 22 series is a new one here. We're starting up for the fall, and as you can see, we're back in person. Maybe a round of applause. It's been a few years. I'm excited to continue hosting this informative series along with our Strategic Partners Director, Paige Shee, who will be moderating some of the future virtual sessions. And I encourage you to just please spread the word about this series. We want to expand our community for the benefit of our stakeholders here at the Georgia Tech Manufacturing Institute. Before I introduce today's speaker, I just want to introduce GTMI and give some brief instructions for the audience. GTMI is one of 11 Georgia Tech interdisciplinary research institutes that uniquely focuses on manufacturing research, development, and employment. We help tackle the grand challenges of today's manufacturers and assist them with moving innovations from the lab to the market. GTMI has a wide variety of facilities and equipment located on main campus for basic research, as well as nearby on 14th Street for more applied research in our advanced manufacturing pilot facility. GTMI's mission includes education workforce training, collaborative partnerships with industry, academia, and government, as well as thought leadership. And by the way, my name is Dr. Billy D. Brown. I forgot to introduce myself. I think a lot of you have seen me introduce these lectures online in the last few years. I was excited to learn that our lectures were some of the most viewed on Georgia Tech's research YouTube page with over 70,000 views. So very excited to learn about that. So GTMI will continue to host Lunch and Learn lecture series each semester. These sessions are excellent opportunities for Georgia Tech faculty, undergraduate, graduate level students and researchers, as well as a global manufacturing community to learn and share advanced manufacturing knowledge. This fall, sessions will be held every Monday at noon. As you can see today, we are in person for the first time since the pandemic, and we're also streaming online via Zoom. This semester, we will have a mix of in-person hybrid format as well as virtual remote sessions. And if you want to check what the format will be in advance, please visit our website and look under the events tab, and you should have all the information you need. We will have a question and answer session at the end of today's session. So if you're in person, you may want to just jot down your questions so you have them ready. Or if you're online, please go ahead and submit your questions in the chat as soon as you have them. And now today, I am pleased to introduce Geoffrey Patton, who will discuss the use of technology in manufacturing processes, how manufacturers use technology to streamline operations. Geoffrey Patton is a graduate of the University of Alabama with a bachelor's degree in operations management. He also has a master's degree from Troy University in management with a concentration in leadership and organizational effectiveness. Geoffrey has worked in various roles related to supply chain and manufacturing, beginning as an entry-level refractory technician for Nucor Steel in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Since then, he has worked as a manufacturing and procurement business analyst, manufacturing ERP functional lead, senior strategy consultant, and most recently, an IT project manager for Georgia Pacific. So in today's session, Geoffrey will discuss the relevant technologies, how they are utilized to facilitate operations and processes, while generating cost savings, promoting efficiency, improving safety, and offering several other benefits. He also will give a brief overview of Georgia Pacific. Geoffrey, you may begin.
Good deal. I appreciate everybody having me today. One thing that you'll know about me, and I would love to learn about y'all, is I teach you a little bit more about me. So I'm very casual. I want this to be, I understand everybody has lunch. I don't want anybody to fall asleep. So I want it to be somewhat interactive and want us to be able to, take away something from today. So real quick, let's see. Take two, real quick, let's see.
Just use the keyboard.
Yeah, that's fine. The perfect introduction for an IT project manager, right?
How many engineers joke in here?
You're the kickoff speaker for the semester.
There we go.
Things are moving.
There you go. Let's see if there we go. All right, cool. So let's start over. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is gonna be a quick agenda. Like I said, I want to keep this very free flowing and open. So we're gonna I'll give you a little bit more introduction on myself. We're gonna talk about some of the technology, some of the key questions that as someone in the industry that I find myself asking, as well as this constantly, asked of us as we go through these projects. I also have some relevant project examples toward the end, and then want to leave some space for your question. So we'll keep going. So thank you, Billy D, for the introduction. This is a little bit about me. This is graduation day. This is my beautiful bride. She's an optometrist here in Georgia as well, but she did chemical engineering in undergrad. So she is definitely very rooted in STEM. Like I say, University of Alabama, was there for a really good time from a football standpoint. So much so that I decided to take a victory lap in my education. I was also at Troy University doing a master's program. These are a few of the companies that I've worked for in the past. I started my career actually with Nucor Steel, worked in various capacities for them. So I started as an intern doing production process projects, so shop floor, process control related projects in our melting and casting department. Went from there, worked a little bit in our rolling mill side, which is going to be less of a process manufacturing look and more of a discrete look, as well as on into our cut to length side, which is also pretty much a discrete process. Then after graduating, hired in full time as an entry-level technician, where I was a refractory technician, where if you're not familiar with steel making, your refractory is basically your coating on all of your equipment that allows for the liquid steel to be able to mix and do what it needs to do without sticking and damaging any of the equipment. So that required laying brick, changing out different materials, different powder substances that would harden once heat is added to it, and so on and so forth. I'll often joke and say that I spent that time shoveling dirt, because sometimes, some days as an entry level guy, that's kind of what I felt like I was doing. From there, I transitioned into more of a project management role with Nucor, where I started doing more of a business analyst role. So I took a step away from the shop floor and started looking at more of the technology impact to operations and the business impact from operations. So taking a step away from adding and blending materials, taking a step away from managing the production schedules and making sure that our inventory levels are stocked and everything. And now I'm looking at more of the dollar signs from our purchases for the materials that we use, and how that transitions based on certain grades of materials, and how those specifications, how they can be improved to improve our purchasing practices, as well as just our overall supply chain practices. So I did that for a while. We also were doing, and I'll get to it in a later slide, but we're also doing an ERP implementation. Does anybody know what an ERP system is? Are you familiar with ERP? Anybody else familiar with ERP? So we were also doing an ERP implementation. So I was brought on to that as well as a subject matter expert for manufacturing and operations. From there, I stepped into more of a consulting role where I was working with clients, both in implementing Oracle ERP from a manufacturing standpoint. I was actually one of the, while at Deloitte, I was one of the first consultants there to take a deep dive view into the process manufacturing functionality with the Oracle Cloud platform. So I was working with clients on how utilizing that cloud-based version of the functionality, how it could benefit and improve how they view their operations. From there, I stepped into another consulting role, Oracle-based, and then worked for Cherry Becker for a little while in more of a strategy-based role that was still manufacturing supply chain focused, where in that role I was more so less focused on the specific technology that's being used and more so coaching leadership on how technology can improve what they're doing. And we'll talk about a couple of the projects there. As far as me, as far as my hobbies, I enjoy golfing, grilling, fishing, and traveling. Billy D lives in my neighborhood. He can tell you that I'm probably grilling at least once a week. And I say once a week pretty loosely because sometimes it's more than that. I love golf. I'm hoping to later this afternoon get to the golf course as well. I also work with South Cobb High School with the golf program as a community volunteer coach. And then fishing, of course, I'm Southern to get, so of course I love fishing. And who doesn't love traveling, right? So yeah, so that's that. I will show a quick video. This is just a quick look at what operations look like on a corrugated floor. So I work for Georgia Pacific Corrugated, which is anybody familiar with corrugated material? So yeah, so we'll see that here in just a second if I can get the mouse to get down to the link. Yeah, I'll let Billy D. That way Georgia Pacific isn't liable to replace a computer. Does anybody have any questions while he's pulling that up on any of my background or anything? We're gonna go a little bit deeper into it, but I definitely want to keep that open.
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing it, okay.
Copy and paste it and then I'll put you.
Yeah, you may have to do that. You may have to copy the hyperlink.
Maybe we should skip it.
Yeah, we can come back to it. That's something that's not gonna take much time, so we'll come back to it. We'll go ahead and jump into, let's see, can you give me back control? Okay, never mind, there we go. I got it. Very good.
Working out all the kinks right now.
Yeah.
It's not advancing.
Yeah. Try this again.
Try it again. You have to reshare the presentation. So just try to keyboard first.
There we go. This is the slide that I need for right now, so we'll come back to it in just a second. All right, so when we talk about technology that's associated most commonly with manufacturing and supply chain, and where a lot of our focus from an industry standpoint comes into place. We see these levels most often. So at the top, typically we have our ERP, our Enterprise Resource Planning solution. That's typically from your big names like your Oracle, your SAP, Workday, Salesforce, all of those big names. That system in itself is basically like a catch-all for all of your tangential systems, as well as for the primary source of truth for all data that flows in and out of an organization. So that's financial data, that's operation data, inventory data, all of those different data points flow through your ERP. The rest of these are systems that are typically bolted on to that ERP. These are systems that typically so primarily your front office or corporate are the primary users of the actual ERP solution. And then your more shop floor personnel are more so using these other solutions here. So we have at the top, we have our ERP. Then from there, we have these two that are also very commonly used, our warehouse management system and our manufacturing execution system. So from a warehouse management system, has anybody ever used a WMS for anything, maybe an internship or anything? Okay, cool. So your WMS, so I like to think of it as, you know, when you think of like a large scale distributor or manufacturer, a distributor being, say, an Amazon, or manufacturing, say, even a Georgia Pacific, you have to have some type of solution in place to keep up with the materials that are both being stored and utilized by your shop floor, and that's able to keep up with it in such a fast-paced environment. So when we think about, just to give you an example from when I was working for Nucor Steel, when I was on the shop floor managing the operations. So we're utilizing tons of material, raw materials, by the second, by the minute, constantly utilizing. So you have to have something that's going to help manage and facilitate the movement of those items. Then you also have your manufacturing execution system, which those are going to be more so on as part of your process where you're executing your operation. So let's just say if we had a process right here to the common examples to make bicycles or to make chairs or something, at every step of that manufacturing process, at every step of your adding a material or you're executing a change to the material, then that has to be entered into your manufacturing execution system, which both of those feed back to your ERP, and that's where your financial data and everything flows back to. Other systems that are commonly used, but are not necessarily required per se, but we're starting to see a huge push toward these items in our shop floors, but integrated scanning capabilities. Does anybody know what integrated scanning is? Or would anybody like to say what they think of when they hear integrated scanning?
I think it's mostly using RFID tags.
Yeah.
Like I know a lot. They use it a lot in dies, like die tools. So they basically count how many times the die tool goes down. That it's used for like life cycle analysis. I think they're trying to do QR codes too, but
So that's a really good example of an integrated scanning solution. We see it both there. We also see it in a lot of our warehouse operations as far as keeping up with material. When you think about, say, an Amazon, that's constantly, I can order a new clicker. I can order a new clicker from Amazon right now, and I guarantee you it'll be here before the presentation's over. And when they go to pull that clicker from inventory, they're scanning it and it's updating all the information. So that's a use case of how technology streamlines and makes certain operations more efficient. To your point also, we also have Iot and Production Monitoring. So a lot of the times, is anybody familiar with production monitoring as well. So a lot of the times, companies will look to implement more of a production monitoring tool onto their manufacturing systems. As far as I see it mostly in a discrete shop, so something that's packaging related, something that's more assembly related, and it's trying to capture those metrics of timing. So for example, in one of the use cases we'll see in a little while, I worked with a client that was a health foods manufacturer, and they wanted a production monitoring solution to capture basically every time or the times in between the material hitting inside of the packages and how much time is left in between that process. So they could see if there was any opportunity to speed up the process. They could see if there's anything that they needed to plan for downstream in that process as far as loading trucks and everything. So that's something that we see there. And then we also have more industry specific technology. So when we think about, for example, I work for Georgia Pacific Corrugated, and we utilize an ERP known as Kiwi Plan that's specifically for corrugated operations. So someone that say specializes in making tables would not have any benefit for this system. Is purely for that specific operation. And so that's just a quick high level overview of the different systems that are in place. Does anybody have any questions or comments on these? Please feel free to throw anything out there.
Does Georgia Pacific use any IoT?
So we're using it in some of our shops. So in our, sorry, I walked right into that light. So we're using it in some of our shops. For us in packaging is very important so that we can keep up with our color box operation, so that we can keep up with the different die cuts that we make on the boxes that we generate, so we can keep up with those timestamps and those efficiency measures. So yes, so we do utilize some IoT. We don't really do as much scanning in our warehouses, but we're trying to move a little bit more towards those things. Anybody else have anything you want to throw out there? Questions, comments? All right, well, cool. So then, let's see. So as I said before, we talked about some of the key questions that come up often when we think about technology as it relates to operations. So why is technology valuable? Why is innovation necessary? And what does the future of supply chain and manufacturing look like? So for the first question, if I can figure out where we are, here we go. There we go. So for the first question, why is technology valuable? So before I get into these key things, I know that sounds like a very obvious question as far as why is technology valuable, but you would be surprised at when you start looking at a lot of operations personnel for manufacturing organizations. A lot of them are very resistant to technology. Does anybody have any idea as to why there would be some resistance to technology in operations?
Some of it could be unproven.
What's that?
Some of it can be unproven in an industrial environment, like
Yeah.
one is rugged, I guess.
Yeah. That's a good example. Anybody else?
Job loss.
Who said that?
Go ahead.
That's what I was gonna say.
What was that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it.
Job loss.
Yeah, bingo. I actually have seen that several times where they may not come out and flat out say it, but you can tell that they're worried or concerned about a piece of technology changing their jobs. However, the goal overall when we implement these technologies is not to is not geared to take away jobs. It's geared to evolve jobs and to put our organizations in the best possible way or the most efficient ways to operate while also doing it safely and saving money, as well as creating a more robust skill set throughout our organization. So so that's some of the things there. For the safety piece, as who's heard the statement, if you know better, you do better. You know, as you grow in these things, I can remember my early days in manufacturing. As a matter of fact, one of my first manufacturing based jobs, I worked at a scrap metal yard, when I was a freshman in college. The job I took basically to make some extra beer money, but it kind of, you know, turned into a career. But I worked in the scrap yard, and a lot of the safety culture that was around some of the equipment that we used was just non-existent in a lot of ways. There were we had very limited PPE. Everybody's familiar with PPE, of course, coming out of COVID-19. How can you not be familiar with PPE? But there was limited use of PPE. There was limited systems and tools to help facilitate some of the operations. For example, certain saws that may be used to cut certain materials had less guards on it, had less automation in place. So, you know, there's a lot more manual intervention, and the more manual intervention you have in those processes, the more opportunities for a safety failure that you create. So implementing certain technologies, when we think about what we just saw on this other page, when we think about an integrated scanning solution to where we can scan a certain material and have everything go, to limit the amount of movement that a shop floor personnel has to do in the operation, that's an opportunity to reduce a trip hazard or to reduce a mistake due to fatigue or any other reason, as well as efficiency. When we think about how inefficient a lot of operations are, and I'm here to tell you, having worked for different manufacturers, having worked in different types of industries, a lot of operations are not as advanced as we assume that they are as a consumer. You know, I'm here to tell you how many different operations that may be national brands that are essentially operated out of Microsoft Excel. You know, and they have engaged me in the past to come in and say, hey, what can we do to improve it? You know, how can we get better at this particular task? How can we change the amount of time that we spend on creating this solution? Prime example, currently one of the projects that I'm managing is the implementation of an automated scheduling solution. And so as we go to our different plants, oftentimes we will engage with our schedulers, and there's a comparison between what the scheduler manually generates for the production schedule for our corrugators versus what the scheduling solution generates. And typically it's usually right, like pretty, like 100% or pretty close to 100% accurate. Excuse me. However, the solution does it with the click of a button, and the scheduler, it may take a lot longer than a click of a button to actually filter things out. So it allows that scheduler, having that automated solution allows the scheduler to not spend so much of his or her day-to-day in writing out manually what the production schedule is going to be, and can allocate that time to doing other tasks. So implement these technologies, it provides efficiencies and then overall cost savings. I worked with the client, the Medifast client, and we'll get to it here in just a little while, but just for this little piece, part of that project was to implement an IoT production monitoring system for their packaging. A large benefit of that solution was going to be to reduce a lot of the waste that came in that process, to be able to catch certain system inefficiencies and certain errors before they would generate downtime for that client. So then they're able to, you know, not lose as much material or time in the operation with that solution. Does anybody have any questions or comment before we go to the next one? All right. And so then why is innovation necessary? You know, innovation is necessary for the sake of this conversation, for these two primary drivers that are there. Innovation is necessary for competition. When I think about COVID-19's impact on the supply chain and manufacturing industry, right? Amazon was probably one of the most prepared companies or organizations out there to transition to more of a virtual ordering model because, you know, that was their bread and butter for a while. So a lot of other companies had to learn how to adapt and how to allocate certain technologies to be able to improve how they serve the consumer. And so competition constantly drives innovation. I remember when I worked with a company, one of the driving points was for going through with an Erp implementation was the CEO came in and he looked at what it took for a customer to generate and order for the material. That sales analyst had to go into 3 or 4 different 3-ring binders and look for certain sales rates and everything to be able to generate the information necessary to provide an order for that customer. And he basically said that is unacceptable. Whereas some of that company's competitors essentially had already transitioned to more of a retail model to where a customer could just go online, select what they want, and the order ships off to the manufacturing, and goes straight to fulfillment. And so that competition, seeing that gap in their own operation versus their competitors, drove a strict need for implementing a different type of technology solution into the operation. The next driver that we'll talk about for this is going to be overall organizational growth. So when I worked for Cherry Becker, most of the clients that engaged us were clients that were growing and transitioning from your QuickBooks level of info system in their org and needing something more robust to be able to fulfill their operations. Organizational growth is a huge driver for needing innovation, for needing other technologies, because, you know, let's just say I start a t-shirt company today, right? And as part of that t-shirt company, you know, I'm doing an average of, say, 5 sales a week, you know, just something very, very modest. If I'm doing 5 sales a week, I do not need to go and invest in an Oracle or SAP ERP solution, right? Because I won't get that return benefit from it, right? So let's say that, for example, I am Kith. Anybody familiar with Kith clothing? All right, so let's try another one. Let's say I'm Nike. Let's go with that. Let's say I'm Nike. I guarantee you, Nike is so far past keeping up with their orders on Microsoft Excel because of how large of an organization that they are. So that organizational growth, it takes leadership, seeing the vision for the company and seeing where they currently are. And that gap in there is where technology fits in to be able to take them to the next level. Any questions on the innovation piece? All right. And so then we'll look at the last question for this in just a second.
Try the keyboard.
Oh, wait, there we go. All right, so when we look at the last thing, so what does the future of supply chain and manufacturing look like? I'm sure y'all have never heard the term Industry 4.0, being a part of the Manufacturing Institute, right? So Industry 4.0 is a major driver that pretty much encompasses everything that we've talked about to this point. All of it is a part of Industry 4.0. When we look at what we can do as organizations to take our part in it, that's when, you know, we're able to become a lot more innovative in our team structures. We're able to become a lot more innovative in how we meet and engage with our customers. We're taking a closer lens to our upstream and downstream processes. And we're looking for opportunities where we can incorporate more automation into our operations. Is anybody familiar with RPA? Anybody heard of RPA, familiar with RPA? So RPA is robotic process automation. So I remember my first exposure to robots as part of an operation was when I was on the shop floor and we received a physical robot that would take temperatures of liquid steel and samples of liquid steel for us as a safety and efficiency measure, because they take an exact temperature and exact sample every time. So you didn't have as much variation between different people's process. That I thought was the way of the future. I thought, oh my God, how can we ever do anything past that? Well, cut to in 2019, we worked with, while I was at Deloitte, we worked with some clients to talk through how to utilize RPA or robots for other solutions. So when we think about a customer, the process of a customer submitting an order. I'm sorry, what's your name right here, sir?
Austin.
Austin. All right, so Austin, let's say that Jeff submits an order for Austin Co. For a new set of headphones. I'm saying headphones for those on the Zoom because that's what's on his desk. So submit an order for a new set of headphones. However, one contingency of the order is if you can have it fulfilled by Friday, September 16th. So what an RPA solution can do, and this is simplifying, you know, the tech of it. What an RPA solution can do is it can receive that order, go ahead and scan through all of Austin Co's inventory constraints, go ahead and scan through all of Austin Co's other orders that are coming up, look at the production schedule and look at the manufacturing or the manufacturer's work schedules and see if there is space in that timeline to fulfill that order. And the RPA bot, what it can do is go ahead and submit that order, have it on the production schedule, have the correspondence sent back to me to say, yes, your order will be there by Thursday at 11:59 p.m. And that's something that, as we look at how we engage with our customers, how we make things better and more convenient for our customers, that's something that's proving to be so invaluable from a revenue generator that more and more industries, more and more more and more organizations are starting to pour a lot more resources into. And so that's what we look at when we think about manufacturing. Gone are the days of a lot of our parents and grandparents' generation where you would go to a shop floor and every one person has one specific task that they do. you know, and that being a part of operations. I always laugh because when I first got my first job in steel making, the only thing I knew about steel making was the scene in Rudy, when the unfortunate scene in the movie Rudy. I won't go into detail, but that was the only thing that I knew about steel making. And I was so amazed at how technically different the steel making process was from what was shown in that video, you know, and we're going even further from that now. So any questions on any of this before we start talking about some of the project examples? Yes, sir.
So in your industry 4.0 efforts, how open is your supply chain for your industry to actually expose that data to you so you can actually make decisions? Like the example you gave.
Yeah,
The example you gave may be applicable within your own manufacturing operations, but if you are depending on suppliers to supply you things, are suppliers open to exposing their manufacturing shop data, for example, to you?
Yes, we have seen some movement in that where a lot of suppliers, and I think COVID was a big driver to that, to where a lot of suppliers recognize that, you know, a lot of the former ways of doing things won't necessarily work going forward. We've seen clients where, well, maybe not with GP, but in my former days, I've seen clients that had basically built their whole business model off of being one major manufacturer's primary solution for one material. And when COVID happened and when operations slows and when resource availability decreases, they recognize that, hey, we got to do something different. So I think all across the industry, both upstream and downstream, are interested in moving closer to more of an automated model for a lot of solutions if it's going to generate more revenue. Any other questions or comments? All right, so we'll look at so in this next group, I know that how are we doing on time?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
15 minutes, okay, cool. So in this next group, we're just gonna look at some different projects that I've worked on that vary in degree of technology use, but all all made pretty significant impacts to the organization. So for the first one was when I was with Nucor Steel, when I was working with the team after the first plant went live with the ERP solution, it was discovered that there was no defined process for inventory and purchasing reconciliations. So our shop floors were utilizing material like day in and day out, and still making 75% of all purchasing in the organization is raw materials. So that bears a pretty important need for the organization to have some type of reconciliation to be able to look at, hey, I said I bought this, I actually did receive it, and I actually did use it here, and it's now in that product. So being able to walk through that process, this solution came from or started with a simple Microsoft Excel. I mapped out with using just some simple VLOOKUP functionality just to map out what that would look like, what that reconciliation would look like. Now today, or most recently, that solution had evolved into its own separate program with its own separate user interface, with everything where users can go in and can validate and reconcile all of the information for themselves. So something as simple as utilizing a Microsoft Excel to map out how data flows can result in a major tech solution as well as can provide an intense benefit for the organization. So that's kind of like the lower one. This one was when I was at Deloitte servicing the client, the food manufacturer that we spoke about before. They needed more automation on in the operations and on the shop floor. So so one thing that we noticed when we engaged with them, remember how earlier in the presentation I spoke about how some manufacturers are still utilizing Microsoft Excel as a major driver. So this organization in particular was utilizing Microsoft Excel due to some system inefficiencies. So we went in and we looked at, we threw the full gambit at them. You know, they wanted, they were already in the process of implementing Oracle Cloud for the ERP solution. We also brought to their attention a gross need for integrated scanning because they struggled with maintaining and managing the movement of their inventory. This manufacturer had an offsite warehouse for materials. And so oftentimes the scheduling had to be extremely precise, and you had to have, it was no way to operate this efficiently without real-time data. And so we worked with them with the increase in the cloud solution for the ERP, the integrated scanning, and we also implemented some IoT so they could do better with their material loss as well as their material times for the packaging operation. And so that was a major benefit. So that was a much more robust project. And then this last one, this project was for this is actually a local company that specialized in firewood, luxury firewood. Exactly. Yeah. So now, mind you, they gave me a sample. It was some doggone good firewood. I'll admit, but yeah. Oh yeah. But I had no idea that was ever a thing. But they came to us, and the products are great. Has anybody ever seen the show, The Great American Barbecue Showdown on Netflix? Oh man, y'all don't know what y'all miss. He knows what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. They were sponsors of that show. So most of the wood that was used in that show came from this company. But this was a relatively small company. There was a guy that engaged us. He pretty much started it with just him and his pickup truck. And it grew from there. They have a pretty sizable warehouse operation over in Norcross. However, everything that they did as far as distribution, as far as warehouse inventory, was all managed manually. They were actually barely using Microsoft Excel at the time, and they were utilizing more so pen and paper and just more word of mouth email traffic. They were utilizing a software solution that was more designed for a traveling salesman to manage their truck routing for deliveries. And so they engaged us because they wanted to develop a more integrated delivery system that would be more in tune with their order receiving, so that it could be closer to real time for the deliveries. And the project actually in turn changed to an overall full view of the shop floor and upgrading as many things that we possibly could. And that company is still continuing to grow. I actually saw recently that they are able to incorporate more trucks, and they're getting more innovative with their delivery solutions overall. So I share all that to say there's a lot of different use cases for technology and manufacturing. I'm sure many of you, as you came into this session, you saw technology and manufacturing, you said, oh man, perfect time to take a nap. It's not interesting, but so I hope that this was somewhat interesting for you, and I hope that it kind of sparks some ideas for you. I don't know if you're doing research or even as you consider the different career opportunities that surround manufacturing from a more technical view. I hope that this influences you well. Does anybody have any questions overall for me as far as the presentation, or just me in general? Yes, sir.
So in general, is GP looking at applying any like digital twin projects to their sort of their products? Like I know for other manufacturers, they'll have like they'll record all of the process data that went in production of that one lot or that one part, and then they'll kind of send that along. So I don't know if GP is doing that because it's mostly continuous manufacturing.
Yeah, so for right now, I'm not as close to that decision, but I will agree that the overall view is from a more continuous lens, as well as with given GP's size and reach, as well as with it being a part of Coke Industries, there's a lot of emphasis on innovation throughout. So I can't say that that's not something that we won't get to. I know right now today, a lot of it is trying to streamline as much of that continuous as much as possible. But I haven't been a part of any conversations related to it.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I was just curious, the firewood companies, are they making like pallets type of firewood, or are we talking about?
Oh, so man, let me tell you. So they do like pretty much any type of firewood you can think of. They do your actual firewood logs for like a campfire or fire pit. They also do wood chunks and wood chips for, say, grilling. And they also do smaller wood logs that are used for pizza ovens. They also generate smaller kindling wood for lighting things. They have one of their big driving pieces is that they have what are called delivery artisans, that they basically treat every customer personally, and they will, of course, if you're buying a certain amount, but they will bring it to your house, set it up for you in a clear location, and you can even engage them to say you're having like a large event, say Georgia Tech is having a bonfire for homecoming. You can engage them to come and manage that bonfire for you as well. So like they cover a wide spectrum of things.
I've seen those Texas barbecue restaurants where they go to the back door and like a whole back.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount of wood.
Oh yeah. They deliver for some customers stacks of wood higher than this podium even. And so yeah, so they are the real deal.
Do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit more about like a little brief overview of Georgia Pacific yourself?
Yeah, sure. So
about the video, or
let's see if we can
try to run it.
get back to the video, just so you can see because the video is primarily just the operations. The video is primarily a view at the operations and everything, but Georgia Pacific is operated in all across America, all across the world. We operate in various different product groups. So you have the packaging group, you have the corrugated group, you have building products. One of the most notable brands. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. He's taking care of it for us too. All right, cool. One of the most notable brands for the organization is Angel Soft Tissue. You all have probably used some type of Georgia Pacific product every day, whether you notice it or not. There's a lot of toiletry related items, as well as corrugated boxes and corrugated packaging. So thinking about like Amazon packaging, thinking about Target boxes, certain, as you saw on the other screen, beer boxes, even this just all across the board, the products are everywhere. I know that this video, we can get it to go. it's going to show you a little bit closer view of what the shop floor operations look like as far as through the corrugation process, or corrugated process. Excuse me, but I'll be more than happy. I was hoping to have one of our recruiters here with me today, but I'll be more than happy to, if anybody's interested in learning more, to take down their information and reach out to that recruiter and get some info for you.
Not pasting the URL.
Yeah, do you know, are you able to speak on
Just go to
any
YouTube.
opportunities for students that are upcoming?
Yes, so one of the big, let me grab my phone, so I want to make sure I tell you the correct title. But one of the big opportunities that's actually coming up where we're looking for upcoming seniors or individuals that are finishing their grad program to take on a role it's more of a business analyst role, but it's directly related to some of our IT support, as well as some of our manufacturing solutions.
Boxes are in.
Is that it?
Yep, that's it. You can.
Did you know that boxes aren't made of cardboard? Well, some are, but not our boxes. Our boxes are made from corrugated board. Corrugated board is made up of several layers of paper. The outside surface is called liner board. The wavy stuff in the middle that you can see through, that's the medium. It gets its signature fluted shape by getting pressed through the rollers of this machine. It then gets glued together with the top and bottom liner board to make a paper sandwich. That's how corrugated board gets its super strength and rigidity. Now we take these big sheets and send them off to another machine. They get die cut, scored, glued, and folded into different dimensions. And naturally, all this is computer controlled and run by some really smart people. Some boxes also get printed, designed, and branded, often in multiple steps and colors, whatever you can dream of. Voila! We just made a box, and now they're ready to be stacked, painted, and shipped all over the world. They're everywhere and essential to so many businesses.
There you go.
Is Amazon one of your biggest clients?
Yes, we have a large presence with Amazon.
Welcome to JP Corrugated.
I'm sorry, you can, yeah. Yes, sir.
So just in general, with kind of IoT methods and kind of industry 4.0 just generating so much data about manufacturing processes, and obviously there's a cost to storing that data, whether it's on a physical hardware solution or storing it on a cloud base like AWS or Microsoft Azure. What is kind of the, if you can speak about this at all, what is the attitude of GP about selecting what data is relevant enough to keep, how far back you can keep that data?
Yeah.
And things like that.
Yeah, sure. So, so that's actually a really good question because I actually just got through working with something with this. So as part of my job as an IT PM, I'm also operate somewhat as an IT manager for corrugated. So I'm looking at a lot of the support and a lot of the data that flows through. And as part of that support, sometimes the data gets hung up in the servers. And so for different server solutions, we have different timeframes that we like to keep data, as well as we engage with a data service provider, MariaDB. They help manage a lot of the databases and give us feedback on how to improve some of that data management. Because to your point, you have a lot of transactional data that's just generated as part of every single process. So so when you think about one sales order or one purchase order or one manufacturing batch, it's not exactly on the servers listed as one item. There's different items for different pieces of that process. So we have to be intentional about how much we keep. So we definitely keep a close lens on it. I actually had an incident recently where we saw, and we're still working through it, but where we saw one of the servers, the date range had malfunctioned to where, and this was in August, but instead of the first date being, we'll just say August 5th, somehow it was changed to April 5th. And so you can imagine how much data was generated on that server as it was trying to pull it, and it slowed a lot of the system operations down. And so we're still working with that provider to kind of troubleshoot to see what happened and to mitigate that from happening in the future.
Good. I think.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I've got.
Well, go ahead, take one more.
I want to ask, so how quickly are all these tools you mentioned like are advancing? Like in the, like, for example, you were mentioning Excel, which almost became a joke to use. I mean, at this point, so like how quickly are these advancing? Like how hard is it to keep up with the updates? Like,
Yeah, so for most ERP solutions, they provide a quarterly to an annual update of the software. Some of the other solutions, it's not as often of an update, and typically the updates aren't as required, so you can be a little bit more selective with what you choose. But for most ERPs, it's typically quarterly to annually.
is that challenging, like to keep up? Like, is
Not exactly as far as challenging to keep up, because a lot of the times part of those updates are certain functionalities that we are looking forward to, or that certain clients have, or several clients have requested. So most of the updates that come through are items that, you know, the user actually wants to receive. So it's not too bad, and we know well in advance of when those updates are coming, and we have control over when we apply those updates to production. Yeah. Sorry.
All right, yeah, I think we should thank our speaker. Sake of time, you know, I'm just gonna wrap things up. It's after 1 now, but I really want to also thank the audience. You guys were very engaging, asking lots of questions, very interested in the seminar, so I really appreciate your participation. Once again, thanks, Geoffrey.
Yeah,
for
no
making
problem.
the presentation.
No problem. Thank y'all for having me.
We will have another seminar next week, but it will be a virtual seminar. So again, this semester, we will have some in-person ones, but we will also have some virtual ones. So just stay abreast of what's going on our website under the events page. Next week, we'll have Jason Roth with Autodesk. He's going to talk about some of the tools, and hopefully we can actually get him or Autodesk to come down and sooner or later in the semester to maybe give a demo of some of these tools and technologies that such as generative design, right? This type of software tools. So thank you guys very much. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you guys again next week.